She was just a struggling single mom, riding home with her son after another long shift. But that evening, on a lonely mountain road, she saw something no one else dared to face. What happened next would change everything. Before we dive into this powerful story, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss more real stories that inspire, move, and teach us all. Lisa Johnson sat on the cracked leather seat of the number 42 bus, her eyelids heavy from a double shift at the diner. Her 10-year-old son, Caleb, leaned against her shoulder, his small backpack still strapped to his chest. The bus rumbled through the dark stretch of Pine Ridge, a winding mountain road just outside Atlanta. For Lisa, this was routine. Work, bus, home. Tomorrow, work again. No car, no luxuries, just survival. Yet she carried herself with quiet strength. Every sacrifice she made was for Caleb. As the bus climbed higher, headlights cut across the road ahead. A sleek black Mercedes appeared in the opposite lane. It moved fast, too fast for such a dangerous curve. Then, in a flash, the unthinkable happened. The car swerved sharply, lost control, and with a sickening screech, it flipped. Once, twice, 3 times. It somersaulted off the edge of the road, crashing down the rocky slope. Sparks lit up the night like fireworks. The bus jolted as passengers gasped. Some shouted, others fumbled with their phones, recording the chaos. A man muttered, "No way anyone survived that." Another said, "Stay back, it could explode." Lisa's heart pounded. She looked at Caleb, wide-eyed and trembling. Every voice around her said, "Don't move, wait for someone else." But deep inside, Lisa couldn't just sit there. "Caleb, stay close," she whispered, clutching his hand. She stood up, her knees weak but determined. "Ma, where are you going?" Caleb asked, fear in his voice. "I can't just watch, baby. Someone needs help." The bus driver hesitated, but opened the door. Lisa stepped into the cold night, her shoes crunching gravel, and ran toward the edge. Passengers peered through the windows, but none followed. Down below, the Mercedes lay on its side, smoke rising from the hood. The windshield was shattered, metal twisted like paper. Inside, through the broken glass, Lisa saw a man slumped over the steering wheel, motionless. Her breath caught. She didn't know who he was. She didn't know he was Richard Bennett, one of the wealthiest CEOs in the country. All she knew was that a human life hung in the balance. "Call 911, she shouted back toward the bus, though she wasn't sure anyone heard. She pulled Caleb closer. "Stay here on the road. Baby, don't move." Then, gripping the guardrail, she climbed down the rocky slope. Each step cut her palms and scraped her arms, but she didn't stop. She could hear Caleb calling after her, his voice trembling. "Mom, please be careful." Lisa reached the wreck, her heart hammering louder than the crackle of sparks. She peered inside, saw blood on the man's forehead, and whispered to herself, "Hold on, don't you dare leave this world tonight." She didn't know it yet, but in that moment, she was about to change 2 lives forever, his and her own. Lisa's hands trembled as she reached the wreck. The air was sharp with the stench of gasoline and burning rubber. The Mercedes groaned under its own weight, its frame twisted beyond recognition. For a moment, she froze, fear rising in her chest. What if it exploded? What if she couldn't get him out? But then she thought of Caleb waiting up on the roadside. If that were her son in the car, she'd pray someone would come. That thought alone gave her courage. She yanked on the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. With all her strength, she kicked the metal near the frame, again and again. Finally, the door gave way with a screech. Inside, the driver was barely conscious, blood trickling down his forehead. His expensive suit was torn, his chest rising in shallow breaths. His phone, cracked and useless, lay on the floorboard. "Sir, can you hear me?" Lisa called out, her voice steady despite the fear choking her throat. The man groaned faintly, but his eyes remained shut. Lisa pulled the small Nokia she carried in her apron pocket and dialed 911. Her voice shook as she spoke. "There's been a terrible accident on Pine Ridge Road. A car flipped off the side. The driver's bleeding, unconscious. Please, send help fast." The dispatcher's voice was calm. "Stay with him." Keep him breathing. Help is on the way. Lisa dropped to her knees beside him. She placed 2 fingers gently at his neck. There it was, a pulse, weak but present. Relief washed over her, but it was fragile. Up above, she could hear Caleb shouting, "Mom, is he alive?" "Yes, baby, but stay there," she called back. Her voice cracked, but she forced strength into it. Other passengers leaned out of the bus windows, still watching, but not one had come down to help. Some even filmed with their phones. Lisa ignored them. Her focus was on the stranger fighting for his life. Minutes felt like hours. She kept talking to him, hoping he could hear her through the haze. "Stay with me, sir. Don't give up now. You've got a reason to fight. Just hold on." Her palms pressed gently against his shoulder, trying to keep him upright. Blood stained her sleeves, but she didn't flinch. She thought about Caleb watching her. What example was she setting? She wanted her son to remember this night not with fear, but with pride, that his mother had done what was right, even when it was hard. Finally, sirens cut through the silence. Red and blue lights lit up the road above. Paramedics rushed down with stretchers and equipment. Lisa stepped back as they took over, her chest heaving. One of the medics glanced at her. "You saved him. If you hadn't kept him awake, he might not have made it." Lisa's knees nearly gave out. She whispered a prayer of thanks as Caleb ran down the slope to hug her tightly. For the first time that night, she allowed herself to cry, not from fear, but from relief. The flashing ambulance lights painted the night in red and blue as paramedics lifted the injured man onto a stretcher. Lisa stood frozen, her apron stained with his blood, Caleb clinging tightly to her arm. She had done everything she could. "We'll take it from here," one of the medics said, giving her a grateful nod. "You did the right thing." Lisa nodded silently, her throat tight. As the ambulance roared away, she felt Caleb tug at her sleeve. "Mom, is he going to die?" She knelt down, brushing his cheek. "I don't know, baby, but we prayed for him, and that's all we can do now." The bus driver honked, calling passengers back. Some climbed aboard quickly, eager to put distance between themselves and the wreck. Lisa and Caleb took their seats again, but the ride home was silent. While others scrolled on their phones, already forgetting the man, Lisa couldn't. His face, pale and still, stayed with her. The next morning, after dropping Caleb at school, Lisa couldn't shake the thought. She learned from a news report that the victim was Richard Bennett, a billionaire businessman known across Georgia. Headlines screamed about the crash, reporters speculating if he would survive. Lisa whispered to herself, so that's who he was. To her, he hadn't been a billionaire in that moment, just a man who needed help. After her shift at the diner, she made a quiet decision. Instead of going straight home, she walked to Grady Memorial Hospital. The lobby smelled of disinfectant and echoed with hurried footsteps. Lisa approached the front desk, nervous. I was at the accident last night," she explained softly. "I just wanted to know if the gentleman made it." The nurse glanced up, studied her face, then sighed. "Is alive, but he's in a coma. Critical, but stable." Lisa swallowed hard, relief mixed with sadness. "Thank you," she whispered. She didn't ask for access, didn't push her way in. She simply stood at the end of the hallway near the intensive care unit, her hands clasped. Through the small glass window, she could see him, pale, hooked to machines, tubes and wires surrounding his body. Her chest tightened. She whispered a prayer under her breath. "Lord, please give this man another chance. Please don't let his story end like this." That night, she went home late, Caleb already asleep on the couch waiting for her. She tucked him in and sat silently at the kitchen table, her mind still at the hospital. Over the next days, Lisa's routine changed. After every shift, no matter how tired, she walked to the hospital. She never spoke to the family members who sometimes stood in the corridor. She never gave her name. She only stood quietly by the window, praying, sometimes humming softly under her breath. To her, it wasn't about recognition. It was about doing what was right, showing humanity in a world that often forgot it. Lisa didn't know if Richard Bennett would ever open his eyes. But she knew one thing. She would keep standing by, even if no one else did. The hospital waiting room smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee. Lisa sat with Caleb on her lap, rocking him gently as the night dragged on. The billionaire still lay in a coma, machines breathing for him, doctors whispering in urgent tones. Lisa wasn't family, but she couldn't bring herself to leave. Something inside told her she had to see this through. As Caleb leaned his head against her chest, he whispered, "Mom, why do we have to stay? Here's people, right?" Lisa smiled softly and brushed her fingers through his curls. "Because sometimes, Caleb, doing the right thing isn't about whether someone needs you. It's about whether you can be there. Tonight, we could—" Her words were steady, but inside her chest, memories stirred. She thought back to the man she once loved, David. He had been her high school sweetheart, her partner in building a little life. They married young, full of dreams that someday they'd have more than just bills and long shifts. For a while, they were happy, but 2 years after Caleb was born, David was gone. Not because he chose to leave, but because life ripped him away. One rainy evening, while driving home from an overnight shift, David's car spun out on the wet road. The call came to Lisa just before dawn. She remembered clutching Caleb, barely a toddler then, sobbing as she realized she'd be raising him alone. The years since had been hard. Lisa never remarried. She worked day and night, patching shift together, making sure Caleb never went to bed hungry, even if it meant she sometimes skipped meals herself. People saw her smile and thought she was strong, but they never saw the tears she cried when the lights were off. Now, sitting in the hospital, Lisa thought of David again. He had been a good man, and if he were alive, he'd be proud that she stopped that bus and helped save a stranger's life. He always used to say, "Lisa, kindness is a way of circling back when you least expect it." Caleb stirred again. "Mom, do you think the man will wake up?" Lisa looked at the closed ICU doors, her voice gentle but firm. "I believe he will. And if he does, I hope he knows his life is worth something, that every breath is a gift." Across the room, a nurse glanced at Lisa, surprised at her presence. "You're still here?" she asked kindly. Lisa nodded. "Yes. I can't explain it, but I need to be here, until I know he's safe." The nurse smiled faintly. "The world could use more people like you." Lisa didn't answer. She only tightened her arms around Caleb, whispering a quiet prayer for the billionaire lying unconscious behind those doors. Little did she know, her prayer, her presence, her very story, would soon change not only his life, but hers as well. The next morning, Lisa's eyes burned from exhaustion. She hadn't slept a wink. Caleb dozed off in the stiff hospital chair beside her, his little hand clutching Hayes. Nurses came and went, glancing at her curiously, but no one told her to leave. Maybe they saw the determination in her eyes. Inside the ICU, the billionaire, James Harrington, she overheard someone say, remained hooked to tubes and machines. His body, battered from the crash, looked fragile despite the power and wealth attached to his name. By mid-morning, footsteps echoed through the hall. A group of people swept in, his personal assistant, a doctor, and 2 sharply dressed men who looked like lawyers. Lisa sat upright, suddenly aware of how out of place she seemed in her worn jeans and faded hoodie. "Status," one of the men demanded. The doctor cleared his throat. "Is stable, but still unconscious. It's a matter of time now." Lisa kept her eyes low, but she could feel their stares. One of them finally asked, "Who are you?" She stood slowly. "My name's Lisa. I was on the bus when his car crashed. I called 911. I couldn't just leave." The assistant blinked in surprise. "You stayed all night?" Lisa nodded. "I have a son. I know what it means to hope someone makes it home alive." The men exchanged glances, then turned their attention back to the doctor, dismissing her silently. Lisa felt her cheeks burn, but she stayed seated. She wasn't here for recognition. She was here because she couldn't walk away from a man clinging to life. Hours passed. Then, just before evening, a faint sound came from the ICU. A groan. Nurses rushed in, monitors beeping. Lisa stood, clutching Caleb's shoulder. Through the glass window, she saw James Harrington's eyelids flutter, his hand twitch weakly against the sheets. "Is waking up," a nurse exclaimed. Lisa pressed a hand to her chest, relief flooding her eyes. Caleb whispered, "Mom, he's alive." Within minutes, the doctor emerged, speaking to the group of men. "He's conscious, weak but responsive. He'll need rest and recovery, but this is a very good sign." The assistant exhaled in relief. "Thank God." Inside the ICU, James Harrington's voice was hoarse as he whispered to the nurse by his bedside, How did I get here?" The nurse leaned close. "You were in a terrible crash, sir. A woman on the bus called 911. She stayed with you until the paramedics arrived, and she hasn't left since." James frowned weakly. "A woman?" "Yes. She's still here in the waiting room with her son." His lips trembled into a faint smile, as if the thought of a stranger's kindness was almost too much to take in. Can I see her?" A moment later, the nurse stepped out and walked toward Lisa. "He's asking to meet the woman who saved him. I think he means you." Lisa froze, her heart racing. She hadn't expected him to even notice her presence, let alone ask for her. She looked at Caleb, who squeezed her hand. "Go, Mom," he whispered. With slow, hesitant steps, Lisa followed the nurse toward the ICU door, unaware that this single moment would be the beginning of a bond that would turn both their worlds upside down. The ICU was quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of machines. Lisa's heart pounded as she stepped inside, her palms damp with nerves. James Harrington lay motionless, his face pale and bruised, but his eyes, though heavy, were open. The nurse leaned closer to him. "Mr. Harrington, this is the woman who called for help. She stayed with you all night." Slowly, James's gaze shifted toward Lisa. His lips parted, and though his voice was barely more than a whisper, the words reached her. "You stayed?" Lisa swallowed hard, forcing a small nod. "Yes, I couldn't leave you there." For a moment, his eyes softened, glistening with something unspoken, gratitude, disbelief, maybe both. His fingers twitched slightly against the sheet, as though he wanted to reach out but didn't have the strength. The nurse touched Lisa's arm gently. "He needs rest now. That's all he can manage today." Lisa gave a faint smile and whispered, "Rest. That's enough." As she turned to leave, Caleb pressed his face to the glass, peering in. James's weak eyes caught the boy's small frame, and with visible effort, he whispered again, almost to himself, "Family." Then his eyes closed, and the machines hummed steadily once more. Lisa stepped out, her heart racing. To anyone else, it was just a weak word from an injured man. But to her, it was proof that he understood. He knew she had been there, and maybe, just maybe, this was only the beginning of something bigger. A month later, Lisa was back to her routine, working double shifts at the diner, walking Caleb to school, and stretching every dollar just to keep the lights on. She often wondered if James Harrington even remembered her. Billionaires lived in a different world. Surely, she thought, a man like him had moved on, until the black SUVs pulled up in front of her tiny apartment building. Neighbors peeked through curtains as sharply dressed men stepped out, one of them approaching Lisa with a polite nod. "Ms. Lisa Carter." Lisa froze, Caleb clutching her leg. "Yes." "We're from Mr. Harrington," the man explained. "He requests your presence." He opened the car door. Her heart hammered. Minutes later, she found herself driven through the gates of an estate so massive it felt unreal. Marble pillars, fountains, and gardens stretched before her eyes. Caleb's mouth fell open. "Mom, this is like a castle." Inside, James Harrington waited. No longer pale and broken, he stood tall in a tailored suit, the very image of power and wealth. But when he saw Lisa, his expression softened. "You came," he said warmly. Lisa swallowed hard. "I didn't really have a choice." James chuckled. "Fair enough. Sit." They sat in a lavish lounge, Caleb perched nervously beside her. James leaned forward. "Lisa, I told you I'd never forget what you did for me, and I don't make empty promises." Before Lisa could reply, two assistants entered, placing a thick envelope and a set of keys on the table. James pushed them toward her. Lisa blinked. "What is this?" "The deed to a house," James said calmly. "A safe home for you and your son. Paid in full. No strings attached. And the envelope holds a trust fund for Caleb's education. Consider it my way of saying thank you for giving me a chance to still be here. Lisa's breath caught. James, I can't accept this. Yes, you can, James interrupted firmly. Because you didn't think twice when you saved my life. This is the least I can do. Caleb's eyes lit up. Mom, a real house. Tears blurred Lisa's vision. She had dreamed of this moment. Stability, safety, a future for her son, but never imagined it would come from a man like James Harrington. Lisa didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But one thing was certain. Her life, and Caleb's, had just changed forever. The greatest rewards don't come when we chase them. They come when we give without expecting anything back. If this story touched your heart, make sure you like and share it with others. And let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you.